Before we get started, if you enjoy this kind of story, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps a lot more than you'd think. And let me know in the comments, what time is it where you are, and where in the world are you listening from? I always like seeing the range. Now go ahead and dim your lights, maybe pull the blankets up just a little tighter, and get ready for a story that'll make your bed feel like a 5-star luxury spa in comparison. Okay. Deep breath. Congratulations. You've just woken up in a log cabin in the year 1806. It's January. You're somewhere in the backwoods of what would eventually be called Kentucky, though right now it's mostly forest, mostly frozen, and mostly not your friend. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? Everything else. There's no alarm clock, no phone, no central heating. Just a brutal draft seeping through the cracks in your wall, a dead fire in the hearth, and your face, which, by the way, has frozen halfway to the pillow. You're under a quilt that feels like it's made of frozen pancakes, and your breath is visible. Congratulations. You've turned into your own humidifier. Your mattress is a sack stuffed with straw, feathers, or whatever else you managed to scavenge last summer. You sleep in your clothes because getting undressed would be a fun way to die. There are no pajamas, no slippers, no fluffy socks, just you. A threadbare shirt, some wool leggings, and the faint hope your toes haven't turned black yet. Also, you're not alone. There's your spouse, 3 kids, maybe your in-laws, possibly a farmhand. Oh, and definitely a mouse or 2, maybe a raccoon in the rafters. It's all very open concept. The cabin is 1 room, 1 door, 0 insulation, and approximately 9 distinct drafts. Each one stings in a new and exciting way. The air smells like a mix of smoke, old sweat, and damp wool. And it sounds quiet. Too quiet. Except it's not. Because beneath that silence is the never-ending creak of the logs, the soft scuttling of things you're pretending not to hear, and the howl of the wind that keeps reminding you that, yes, the roof is made of whatever you nailed up there 5 years ago. Hope you did a good job. You think about staying in bed a little longer, but you know better. The fire's out, which means the cabin's going to go from cold to historic death trap in about 15 minutes if you don't get moving. So, you get up. Well, you try to. But first, you check to see if your feet still work. You slide one out from under the quilt, and it meets the floor with all the warmth and charm of a dead trout. Your heel hits frozen earth. The floor is a patchwork of wood slats, dirt, and wishful thinking. And you stand. Everything hurts. Your back sounds like it's trying to play a banjo. Your knees have gone on strike. You're 32 years old, which in 1806 puts you just over the hill and rolling down the other side. You shuffle to the hearth. It's cold. Of course it is. The embers are long dead, which means step 1 today is fire. Always fire. Without it, everything else fails. You fumble for the kindling, which you stored beside the hearth in what you thought was a dry corner. It's not dry. Of course it's not. It's damp, flaky, and freezing to the touch. But it's all you've got. You try flint and steel. You curse. You try again. Your fingers are too numb, but eventually you get a spark to land. The smoke starts to curl, and with enough prayer and wheezing, it catches. There it is. The small, pitiful flame that stands between you and becoming a log sculpture of a person. While it crackles, you throw on more wood, precious wood, split last summer and rationed like gold. It was stacked outside, under the eave, but snow blew in and crusted it anyway. You bring in a few logs, brush off the ice, and stack them carefully. The smoke is thick at first, always is. You cough, eyes water, but it's worth it. The fire spreads, and the room slowly becomes slightly less deadly. Now it's time to check the children. You shuffle over to the small pile of limbs and blankets in the corner. They're fine, not warm, not rested, but fine. You check for frostbite. No one's blue. That's a win. Breakfast? You wish. But let's talk about it anyway. What's for breakfast in 1806 rural Kentucky? Not much. Maybe a cold bit of cornbread left from yesterday. Maybe some salted pork, if you're rich or reckless with rations. More likely it's mush. You pull a cast iron pot out from beside the hearth. It's crusted with remnants of something beige. You toss in water, ice-cold water that you hauled yesterday from the creek, now stored in a bucket by the door. And it's frozen. Of course. You chip some off with your knife. Into the pot goes water, a handful of cornmeal, maybe some lard if you're lucky, maybe a pinch of salt. You stir, slowly, because your hand hurts from yesterday's wood chopping. Your other hand hurts too, but for different reasons. Possibly frostbite, possibly arthritis, possibly just 1806. The pot starts to simmer. You stir until the mush is thick enough to stand a spoon in. This is your reward for surviving the night. Your children slurp it up without talking. There's no talking in the mornings, just chewing and blinking and quietly wondering if spring will ever come. You eat from the same bowl. There's one spoon that gets passed around. It's made of horn. It's seen things. There is no coffee. Let's be clear about that. There's no caffeine, no milk, no sugar, and definitely no oat milk latte. If you're lucky, you might have brewed some roasted chicory root. It's not coffee. It tastes like a burnt apology, but it's warm. And that's what counts. Once breakfast is done, there's no time for sitting. The day waits for no one. The sun hasn't even made it past the treetops, but your entire morning is already behind schedule. There's no such thing as sleeping in. You don't get a 5 more minutes button in 1806. You get livestock screaming from outside and the growing dread of chores that don't care how tired you are. So you pull on your boots, or more accurately, you force your cracked, frost-numb feet into stiff leather nightmares that once resembled boots, but now just resemble regret. They smell like damp, like mildew, and possibly like raccoon, depending on what crawled into them overnight. You wrap your coat around you. It's made from wool in desperation. It has holes. It's heavy. It does not smell good. But it's all that stands between your internal organs and the frozen Appalachian wind that's been trying to assassinate you since November. You step outside. It's quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that usually means the creek froze solid, the outhouse door is stuck shut, and one of the pigs chewed through the fence again. Welcome to January. Your boots crunch through snow and frozen mud. Every breath feels like inhaling a needle. Your nose starts leaking. Your eyes start watering. Every part of you wants to crawl back inside and cry into the quilt, but the firewood isn't going to chop itself. Neither is the ice going to politely melt. And the chickens? They're not going to stop screaming until you break open their coop and let them out into the soul-crushing cold. First stop, the woodpile. It's not really a pile anymore. It's more like a tragic art installation called The Last 3 Logs. You take your axe in your frozen hands and do the thing you've done 1,000 times before. Split more wood, one piece at a time, while wondering whether you'll still be able to lift your arms tomorrow. The wood doesn't care. It's soaked through. It resists the axe, like it resents being harvested in the first place. Every swing feels like a negotiation. Every miss hits the stump with a dull thud that echoes in your spine. After 30 minutes, you've got a few good splits. Your hands are raw. Your breath comes out in wheezing puffs, and your legs are starting to go numb. You carry the new logs back into the cabin, dump them beside the fire, and get back outside. Because next, the outhouse. Oh yes, time to talk about your bathroom situation. It's a shed, a very cold shed, with a hole in the ground. That's it. That's the whole thing. You don't go to the bathroom, you survive it. The seat is a frozen plank of wood that could easily double as a torture device. There's no toilet paper, just corn cobs, snowballs, or if you're classy, an old scrap of flannel you rinse out with creek water. There's no privacy, no heat, no dignity. You do what must be done. Quickly, carefully, bracing yourself on the sides so you don't lose your balance and tumble into the pit. One mistake out here, and you're the main character in a story no one wants to tell. Back inside, your spouse is stirring the pot again, this time with beans that have been soaking overnight. Lunch is a dream. Maybe a stew. Maybe not. But before that happens, there's more to do. You check the root cellar. It's where you keep food, technically. You lift the trapdoor in the floor and crawl down into a space that smells like mildew, rot, and what used to be a turnip. It's dark, cold, and lined with shelves of what remains from the fall harvest. Potatoes, onions, apples if you're lucky, dried beans, pickled vegetables, a chunk of cured pork that's grown a questionable beard. You take what you need. A couple soft potatoes, some frozen carrots, a jar of sauerkraut that smells like someone's failed science experiment. You don't complain. This is luxury. This is survival. You hand the goods off for stew prep and head out again, because the animals won't feed themselves, and neither will your pride. The barn is about 30 feet away from the cabin, but it might as well be on the moon. You trudge through the snow, past the frozen well, past the pile of broken tools you keep meaning to fix, past a tree stump that has started to resemble your emotional state, weathered, half dead, and surrounded by animal tracks. The door to the barn creaks when you push it, not like a spooky movie creak, more like a reluctant, "Why are you still trying?" creak. Inside, it's somehow colder than outside, which doesn't seem possible until you remember the roof is missing 3 shingles, and the wind uses them like personal entry points. The cows are still alive. That's something. Their breath rises in clouds. Their ribs are visible. You feel guilty about that. Not because you don't feed them, because you do, but because there's just not much to feed them with. Winter hay is thin, half of it molded, the other half frozen solid. You break off a chunk, toss it in the trough, and the cows look at you with the same look your kids gave you this morning. This again? You apologize without saying anything. They eat anyway. The chickens are next. They've been stuffed into a little side hutch packed with straw, a warm rock, and every ounce of hope you can muster. One of them is sitting funny. You hope she's just cold. You hope a lot of things lately. You throw down some feed, grain, crumbs, some dried corn you swept off the cabin floor yesterday. They peck at it like it's the highlight of their week, which it is. You grab the eggs. 3 today. 1 is cracked. One is frozen. The third is a miracle. You pocket it like it's treasure, because it is. Last stop, the pigs. They are grumpy, always are. But in winter, they're also bored, cold, and slightly murderous. You toss some scraps into their pen. They snort and stomp. You back away slowly. You don't want to end up in a tragic folk song. Back inside, you warm your hands by the fire. They feel like someone else's hands now, numb, red, buzzing with cold. You breathe on them, rub them together, press them to your neck. It helps, a little. The stew is happening, slowly, bubbling in the cast iron pot, throwing out smells that are equal parts edible and confusing. You sit near it, not for warmth, but because it's the only mildly comforting thing in your entire day so far. And you look around the cabin. One room, log walls, dirt floor, gaps you stuffed with moss and mud, a tiny window that hasn't been clear since October, a shelf with a Bible, a rusted lantern, some candles too low to use, and a box of sewing needles. Everything in here has a purpose. There's no decoration, no luxury, not unless you count the blanket your grandmother made 30 winters ago. The one with holes and cigarette burns and exactly the kind of smell that means home. Your kids are huddled near the hearth, pretending not to fight. One's carving a stick, one's staring at nothing, one's sick. Of course one's sick. Coughing, pale, warm to the touch, no doctor for miles, no medicine beyond what you grew, dried, or bartered for, and you're out of most of that anyway. So you wrap them tighter, mutter a prayer, and try not to show your face when you look away. You sit. Just for a second, you think about what needs doing next. Churning the butter, sewing the mittens, mending the door, trapping, if you're lucky, hunting, if you're desperate. You glance at the rifle by the door. It's flintlock. It works. Most of the time. You've got 5 bullets, maybe 4. Depends if the last one misfired or just vanished into the snow. Either way, you don't waste them. You can't waste them. And if you want meat in the stew tomorrow, you'll need to leave before first light. Lunch comes and goes without much celebration. The stew is warm. That's its only virtue. It tastes like hot water and regret. There's a bit of meat in it, probably squirrel, maybe rabbit. You're not asking questions, and nobody else is brave enough to guess. There's also turnip. Because of course there is. There's always turnip. You eat it slowly. Not because you're savoring it, but because if you eat too fast, it feels like a betrayal to how long it took to make. 3 hours over a smoky fire just to end up chewing beige sadness. After lunch, you go outside again. The wind's picked up. It cuts through your coat like you aren't wearing anything at all. Your face goes numb in under a minute. You don't even bother wiping your nose anymore. What's the point? You're chopping more wood. You're always chopping more wood. Because the fire needs feeding. Constantly. It's like having a newborn that screams if it's not being smothered in expensive hand-split logs. And you start thinking, how many logs will it take to survive until spring? You do the math in your head. Badly. Because math feels harder when your fingers don't bend right and your lips are cracked from windburn and your right boot sole is separating from the rest of the shoe like it's trying to escape this life without you. You go back inside. A draft meets you at the door like an old enemy. You stare at the ceiling. Well, at the collection of smoke stains, spider webs, and a drip of water forming in the exact spot where your patch job from October has given up. You make a mental note to fix it. Then remember you already did that. Twice. Your spouse is darning socks by the fire. Not because it's fun, but because there's no such thing as new socks. Socks are like people in 1806. They suffer until they fall apart. Then you repurpose the good parts. The children are still quiet. That could mean anything. The sick one has stopped coughing. You wish that made you feel better. There's still work to do. You grab your bucket. You need water. The creek isn't far, but it's just far enough to feel like a journey to the underworld. You walk through snow that reaches your knees. The cold gnaws at your thighs like it's trying to eat you alive from the bottom up. At the bank, the surface is a solid sheet of ice. You chip a hole with the back of your axe. Carefully, because if you fall in, that's it. Game over. You'll be found in April with a frozen expression that says, "Told you I hated winter." You fill the bucket, carry it back with frozen fingers, slosh it once, curse softly, and try again. Inside, you warm it by the fire, not to drink. That comes later. Right now, it's for washing. You soak a cloth in the warm water, wring it out, and wipe your face. That counts as a bath. That's it. That's your whole bathing ritual. In winter, that's all you get. Sometimes you use lye soap, sometimes not, because lye burns and your skin's already dry enough to crack open like an old book. You don't wash your whole body. That's suicide. You wipe down the important parts. Face, hands, armpits. That's it. Hair? Number. Hair can wait until spring. You wipe down the children too, one at a time. No one complains. They know the rules. Hot water is sacred. Movement is effort. Hygiene is survival. The cabin starts to smell better. Slightly. You pretend not to notice the fact that the back corner has started to attract flies in January, which means something probably died under the floorboards. Again. You'll deal with it later. Maybe. Probably not. Afternoon doesn't mean warmth. It just means slightly better light. You open the cabin door and get smacked in the face by another gust of wind that smells like snow, pine, and punishment. You squint up at the sky. It's that miserable gray that makes you unsure whether it's 2 p.m. or 4 p.m. Or maybe the concept of time just gave up today. You do a few more chores that no one will thank you for. You check the fences. Again. You shovel snow away from the door. Again. You try not to slip on the ice patch outside the barn that has claimed 3 buckets and 1 uncle since December. Then, you sit on a log and stare at the woods. They're quiet. Too quiet. And that should be peaceful. But it's not. Because quiet in winter means no birds, no movement. Just the occasional creak of a tree under strain and the distant sound of your own stomach wondering why lunch didn't count. You think about food a lot, about butter, about biscuits, about anything not preserved in salt or vinegar or ice. You remember the last apple from the root cellar. It was soft, kind of wet. You ate it anyway. You're still wondering if that was a mistake. Back inside, the stew pot's been scraped clean. One child is poking the ashes with a stick. One is napping. The sick one is curled up with a damp cloth on their forehead and that faraway look kids get when they're too tired to cry but too young to understand what's happening. You put another log on the fire. It doesn't want to catch at first. Nothing does. But you coax it, blow on it, whisper to it, beg it. Eventually, it roars back to life, or at least coughs in your direction like a dying uncle. You sit down on the floor, back against the wall, and close your eyes for exactly 4 seconds. That's when the roof leaks again. Not a lot, just one slow drop. You look up. The moss plug has failed again. You mentally add repack the roof to your list for tomorrow, knowing full well that the ladder is frozen to the side of the barn and your gloves have holes in them big enough to qualify as windows. You sigh, loudly, on purpose. No one notices. You poke the fire again, watch the sparks. You try to remember what it feels like to sweat, to be warm without layering 3 wool garments and praying to the fire gods. You think about the summer, the heat, the bugs, the endless maddening chores, and somehow you miss it. Because at least your feet weren't frozen solid in your own boots. You stand again. There's no real reason. You just can't sit too long. It hurts. Everything stiffens. And you remember what happened to old Thomas 2 years ago. Sat too long by the fire, stood up too fast, and cracked his hip clean in 2. Took him 6 days to die. You stretch your back. It crackles like a dried twig. You're not old, not really. You're 33. But out here, that's practically ancient. Out here, your body is already halfway through its warranty. And your mind? Your mind's doing that quiet winter thing, where thoughts drift too easily into silence, where a shadow in the woods becomes a threat, where your breath, hanging in the air, looks like something leaving you. You blink, shake your head, back to work. The sun's fading now. Not that it ever fully showed up. Outside, the snow has gone from freshly fallen to crusty nightmare. Everything's coated in a thin layer of ice that crunches like stale bread and hides slippery surprises underneath. You make one last trip to the barn before nightfall. The animals need tucking in, which really just means giving them another armful of frozen hay, muttering good luck, and checking no one's frozen solid. The pigs are already buried in their straw heap. You hope they're asleep and not the other thing. The chickens are huddled in a sad feathered pile of survival instinct. One of them gives you a look. It might be judgment, or it might be frostbite. Hard to say. You light the lantern hanging on the nail by the barn door. The wick sputters, then catches. The flame flickers behind the smudged glass like it's trying to remind you that darkness is about to drop like a guillotine. You move faster now. The cold feels heavier in the dark, like the night itself gets meaner after sundown. Back inside, the cabin is dim and smoky. The fire's still going, but it's tired. You add another log. You watch it steam as it catches, half frozen from the snow you didn't shake off. Dinner is the same stew reheated. It tastes even less like food and more like a liquid memory of food. There's some crumbled bread, too. You gnaw on it carefully. You've already chipped one tooth this winter. You're not looking to even out the set. The kids eat without talking. You eat without tasting. Your spouse eats without blinking. The wind outside is howling now. You feel it in the walls. The gaps you plugged with mud last fall are weeping cold air. One corner of the cabin groans like it's questioning your life choices. You lay out the bedding, which is to say, you shake out the straw mattress, knock loose the worst of the bugs, fluff the pillow that used to be a flour sack, and pull down the wool blanket that weighs about 15 pounds and smells like sheep trauma. Everyone piles in. 2 adults, 3 kids, 1 mattress, no privacy, no room, no complaints, because that's just how it is. The youngest sleeps between you. part insulation, part constant motion machine. The sick one is coughing again. It's deeper now. You don't say anything. You just press a warm cloth to their chest and pray it's just the cold and not the beginning of something worse. Because out here, something worse is never far. There's no doctor, no medicine, no phone call, no quick fix. Just time, hope, and soup. You close your eyes, but you don't sleep. Not right away. You listen to the wind pressing against the logs like it wants in, to the fire snapping and settling into embers, to the sound of someone's breathing hitching, just for a second, before returning to normal. You wrap the blanket tighter. You flex your fingers to see if you still can. You try not to think about tomorrow, because tomorrow is just today, but colder. At some point during the night, you wake up, not because you want to, but because the fire's out. Again. The cold has crept back in like it owns the place. You feel it in your teeth. You feel it in the air, in that sharp, hollow way that only cabin air can feel when the warmth dies and the dark takes over completely. Your eyes are open, but you can't see anything. It's black in here. No moonlight, no starlight. Just the void, broken only by the occasional crack of the logs shifting in the walls and someone murmuring in their sleep. You try to slide out from under the blanket without waking everyone else. It's like removing yourself from a pile of grumpy, shivering kittens without causing a riot. Someone stirs. You freeze. Wait. Then move again. Your boots are frozen. You stick your foot in anyway. Because what's the alternative? Walking barefoot across the frozen floor? No thanks. You stumble toward the hearth. You know where it is by instinct now. You kneel beside it, fingers stiff, breath short. There's a whisper of ember left. Just barely. You build the fire back up like you're apologizing to it. Carefully, reverently. You blow on it, coax it, offer it twigs and dry bark and whatever else you kept stashed in a metal tin for emergencies. Like this one, it catches, barely. You sit there in your coat, hunched over the hearth, staring into the flicker like it's a fortune teller. You wonder how much longer the wood will last, how much longer you'll last. You glance at the door. There's frost on the inside, not just condensation. Frost. You press a finger against it. It melts instantly, then refreezes in a few seconds. Your breath hangs in the air like fog. You wonder, in a passing, exhausted way, if this is what ghosts feel like. Behind you, someone coughs again, deep and wet. You close your eyes, then reopen them, because you know if you fall asleep now, you might not wake up. You feed the fire again, and sit. Just for a minute. Just until the warmth returns. Eventually, morning stumbles back in. There's no sunrise, not really. Just a pale smudge of light behind the frostbitten clouds. The cabin brightens by a shade or two, enough that you can see the rafters and the low-hanging line of laundry that hasn't dried in 3 days. You stretch. It hurts. Of course it hurts. You stand. Your knees crack. Your back objects. You shuffle toward the door. Another day begins. And everything that broke yesterday? Still broken. Everything you fixed? Probably broken again. Everything you hoped would be easier? Definitely not. Because in 1806, winter doesn't care. It doesn't care how tired you are. It doesn't care how careful you've been. It doesn't care if you prayed last night or cried into your stew. Winter is just winter. And you're just a person trying to survive it, one frozen morning at a time. South. The new day starts the same as the last one ended, cold, quiet, and full of tasks that won't do themselves. First priority, fire, again, always. You poke at the embers. They're sullen, moody, like a teenager who didn't get enough sleep and now refuses to participate in society. You add more wood, blow gently, curse a little. The flame catches, but barely. It's a sad little fire, but it's yours. You shuffle back to the table, or the thing you call a table. It's really just 4 uneven boards nailed together and balanced on 2 barrels. The top is warped. There's a knife mark in the center from that time you were overconfident with a squash. Breakfast options? Same as yesterday. Corn mush. Leftover stew if you're lucky. Bread, maybe, if it didn't freeze solid overnight. The butter is hard as a rock. The lard is, well, it's lard. You chip off a piece with the side of a spoon and pretend it's a delicacy. You serve it to the kids. They eat it without complaining. They stopped complaining around mid-December. One of them stares into the fire like they're trying to communicate with it. You eat your own portion. It's warm. That's the only compliment it gets. Then it's time to check the traps, because if you want meat tonight, you need to go see if the forest has decided to be generous. You grab your coat. It smells like smoke, wet wool, and every bad decision you've made since moving here. You grab your rifle. You count the bullets again. Still 4. You step outside. It's snowing. Of course it is. Not the fluffy kind, the sharp kind. Like each flake is trying to cut your face open on its way down. You head toward the tree line, step by step, past the outhouse, past the well, past the frozen bucket you forgot to bring in yesterday that now looks like an ice sculpture of your own failure. You reach the first trap. Empty. Second one, also empty. Third trap, jackpot. A rabbit. Small, scrawny, looks half frozen already. But it's food. You whisper a quiet thank you to the woods, even though you're not entirely sure they're listening. You check the final trap, another rabbit. Even smaller. Still alive. You handle it quickly, efficiently. You don't feel good about it, but you feel relieved. You carry your prizes home. It's a slow walk. Your boots are heavy. Your shoulders hurt. Your fingers have lost all sensation. Back at the cabin, you skin and clean the rabbits outside. The kids don't watch. They've seen it enough. You save the meat for dinner. The bones go in the stew pot. Again. Everything else gets buried in the snow out back. You hope nothing digs it up. Again. Inside, the fire's doing better. The room smells like rabbit, onions, and fatigue. You sit. Your back hurts. Your shoulders ache. You catch yourself nodding off. But it's not even noon yet. And the stew needs stirring. And the roof still leaks, and your boots need patching, and the children's mittens have holes, and tomorrow's firewood isn't chopped yet, and you're still wearing the same shirt you slept in, which is the same shirt you wore yesterday, which is the same shirt you've been wearing for a week. Because washing clothes? In winter? That's not a task. That's a punishment. You tell yourself today's the day you finally do the wash. Because the shirts stink, the socks are stiff, the underthings could walk off on their own. So you gather everything up, layers of wool and linen and whatever scrap fabric you've stitched into something vaguely shirt-shaped over the past few years, and you dump them into a wooden tub. Now begins the first part of 1806 laundry day, hauling water. Because there's no faucet, no plumbing, just a frozen creek and a splintered bucket that leaks slightly if you tilt it wrong. You make 5 trips. 5. By the end, your arms feel like stretched leather. Your hands are red, your nose is dripping, and your boots are soaked through. You already hate laundry. You haven't even started. You add lye soap, if you have it. If not, ashes and animal fat. The same stuff you use to clean floors, scrub tools, and in desperate moments, your own scalp. It smells like pain. You start scrubbing. There's no washboard, just your knuckles and a smooth rock you flattened years ago because it was the right shape for punishment. You dunk. You scrub. You rinse. You repeat. It takes hours. Meanwhile, the wet clothes freeze the second you hang them out. You pin up a line between 2 trees. By the time you get to the 4th item, the first shirt is already stiff as wood. A sad, frozen flag of your ongoing failure. You leave them there anyway. Maybe they'll dry. Maybe they'll just become decorative. Back inside, you check on the stew. Still stew. Still gray. Still stew. You stir it again, just to feel like you're doing something. The children are restless. They're too cold to go outside, too bored to sit still. One is carving a stick into a smaller stick. One is unraveling their socks, one thread at a time, just to feel alive. The sick one is asleep, finally. You don't wake them. Your spouse is mending something in the corner. A glove, maybe, or a boot. It's hard to tell. Everything's frayed. Everything's breaking, including your patience. You stare at the wall for a bit, not because it's interesting, but because it's all you've got. There's a crack in one of the logs. You've stuffed it with moss. Again. Still, the wind whispers through like it's trying to remind you what failure smells like. Evening creeps in early. You can feel it in your joints before you see it outside. The sky turns the color of old ash. The fire dims. You add another log. Only 4 left beside the hearth. You tell yourself you'll chop more tomorrow. You've said that every day this week. Dinner is rabbit stew. Again. It's saltier than usual. That's probably a mistake, but you don't care. You eat in silence. No one speaks. There's nothing new to say. You chew. You swallow. You exist. That's enough for tonight. After dinner, you scrape the bowls clean. You don't waste food. Not a single grain. Not a drip of broth. Anything left gets fed to the dog, if you have one, or scraped into the slop bucket for the pigs. If you're really scraping bottom, it gets repurposed for tomorrow's breakfast, which doesn't bear thinking about. The dishes aren't really washed so much as rinsed aggressively with cold water and hope. The water is slushy. You dip your hands in it anyway. They go numb instantly. You wipe the bowls with a cloth that hasn't been cleaned since autumn. It smells like mildew and soap that gave up. After dishes, there's still light left from the fire. So you pretend to be productive. You darn a sock, or you try to. You keep losing your needle in the dimness and stabbing your thumb instead. You mutter under your breath, quietly cursing everything from wool to darkness to whoever first invented feet. Your spouse is spinning wool in the corner. Not because it's a hobby, but because without it, your kids won't have mittens. And if they don't have mittens, You'll be warming their hands over the fire while trying to boil snow for soup. You sit on a stool that's wobbly in a way that perfectly matches your spirit. The seat creaks every time you breathe. The kids are lying on the floor now, close to the fire. One is drawing in the ashes with a stick. One is chewing on their own sleeve. They'll grow out of it, or they won't. Either way, it doesn't matter as long as they stay warm. Outside, you hear the wind again. Always the wind. Like it's circling the cabin, like it's waiting. The fire pops. A log splits with a sharp crack, and for a second, everyone in the room flinches because loud noises mean something out here. A tree falling, a roof beam cracking, a predator testing the door. You check the lock, which is just a wooden bar across the inside of the frame. It wouldn't stop a bear or a thief or a determined gust of wind, but it gives the illusion of safety, and sometimes that's all you get. Someone sneezes. Loud. The sick child stirs, coughs again. You look at their face. Their cheeks are flushed, eyes sunken, breathing shallow. You feel that twist in your gut, that one you felt before, the quiet panic, the creeping dread, because you know what it looks like when a winter illness digs in. You sit beside them. You press the cloth to their head. It's still warm. You say nothing. There's nothing to say. You've done all you can, which isn't much. Out here, there's no doctor riding in from town, no fever medicine. Just you, a wet rag, and hope. You don't sleep much that night. You doze. You jerk awake every time someone coughs. You listen for breathing, count heartbeats with your fingers. You whisper prayers you stopped believing in years ago. The fire burns low. You run out of wood around 3 a.m. You sit by the hearth with your arms around your knees, watching your own breath swirl in the dark like smoke from a candle that just went out. By morning, the cabin smells like damp wool, old stew, and sickness. You've been up half the night feeding the fire, checking the child's breathing, and watching the frost creep back across the window like a slow, deliberate hand. It's barely light outside when you hear the first sound, something cracking in the woods. Could be a branch. Could be something watching. You hold still. Wait. Listen harder. Nothing. But now you're awake. Fully. You rise slowly. Your knees ache. Your back feels like someone beat it with a broomstick made of regrets. You slip on your boots. They're even colder today somehow. You tell yourself they're just boots, not torture devices. It doesn't help. You look at the fire. It's clinging to life the way you are. You give it the last dry log and sit for a moment with your hands near the flame, pretending it's enough. Breakfast is thin today. Thinner than usual. A scrap of leftover stew diluted with snow water and boiled again into something that technically counts as hot. The kids don't ask what it is. You don't either. One of them won't eat. The sick one. They're awake, but quiet. Too quiet. You check their forehead again. Still burning. Lips dry. Eyes unfocused. You try to hide the worry in your face. You fail. Your spouse sees it, says nothing, just stirs the pot and adds another dash of salt like that might fix something. There's no medicine left. You used the willow bark days ago. The mint leaves are gone. You still have a bundle of dried herbs on the wall, but they're for cramps or cuts. Not this. You go outside. You need to think. The wind meets you like a slap. It howls through the trees like it's singing a funeral hymn. You chop wood, not because you need to, but because it's the only thing you can do with your hands that doesn't involve standing helpless in a room full of fear. Each swing sends a shock up your arms. Each log split gives you 2 seconds of feeling like something in your world can still be controlled. You come back in with red fingers and a new stack for the fire. The sick child has fallen asleep again, shivering in their blanket. The others are playing a game with sticks and stones. One cheats, one cries. The usual. The day stretches on. You sew, you mend, you clean the floor with a rag dipped in hot water and ash. You keep busy. Because if you stop, you'll start thinking about what happens if the fever doesn't break. About what happened last winter when your neighbor's son went quiet in the middle of the night and never woke up. About how quiet the cabin would be with one less child coughing in the dark. You stir the stew again. You add more water. Make it stretch. Because winter's not done with you yet. Not even close. By mid-afternoon, the sky darkens again. The kind of dark that doesn't wait for evening. The kind that says, "Storm's coming." You feel it in your teeth, in your knees, in that old scar on your left hand from splitting wood without gloves. Everything tightens. Everything warns you. You step outside to check the clouds. Gray, thick, rolling in from the west like a wall of silent fury. You head back inside and shut the door with more weight than usual. You wedge the blanket roll against the base to stop the draft. Doesn't help much. You've been through storms before. You know how this goes. First, double-check the firewood. You count what's left by the hearth. 6 logs, 3 half-splits, 2 twigs and a stick you're not sure belongs inside. That won't last the night. You haul your coat back on, grab the axe, and head to the pile out back. It's buried again. The snow drifts are knee-deep now. You don't have time to dig it out. So you hack straight into the nearest log stack like a wild animal. The wood is wet. It resists. Your breath is loud in your ears. Your fingers burn. By the time you've split 8 decent chunks, your legs are soaked. Your back is screaming. You carry the logs to the cabin in 2 trips, arms shaking, every step a challenge. You dump them beside the door, slam it shut behind you, and stamp your feet like it'll scare the cold off. Inside, your spouse is lighting extra candles, 1 in a tin, 1 in a jar. One stuck into a chunk of firewood like a sad birthday cake. The room smells like wax, onions, and rabbit bones. You sit near the fire again, not for comfort, there isn't any, but for necessity. The sick child is worse. The cough is dry now, hollow. Their skin has gone pale in that way that doesn't look like sleep. Their lips are cracked. Their eyes flutter, but don't stay open long. You spoon broth into their mouth. They swallow, barely. You want to believe that's a good sign, but you know better. You heat water, add mint. It's not much. You give it to them anyway. You say nothing. There's nothing left to say. The wind picks up around dusk. It wails. The cabin moans in reply. The logs creak. The roof shifts. The whole structure seems to breathe around you, exhaling smoke and groaning like an old man trying to hold in a sneeze. The children press closer together on the floor. One of them asks if the storm will blow the house down. You tell them no. You lie. Not because you're trying to be cruel, but because the truth doesn't help right now. The truth is that the walls are only as strong as the trees you cut and the nails you didn't have. And if the wind wants in, it will find a way. You bank the fire, check the windows, tie the shutters. Then you do something strange. You sit down at the table and you write a few lines in the family Bible. Not a prayer, not a journal, just names, births, one death already etched from last year. You leave a little space underneath, just in case. The wind screams all night, not whistles, not howls, screams. It presses against the walls like a giant hand trying to flatten the cabin. It shoves smoke back down the chimney. It rattles the shutters so hard you expect them to fly off and disappear into the dark. No one sleeps. You lie there, on the mattress that's gone lumpy from years of shared weight and damp, with one child tucked under your arm and another curled beside your knees. You feel every breath they take, every twitch, every shiver. You keep checking the sick one. You're afraid to look, more afraid not to. They're still warm, still breathing. But it's shallow, unsteady. That dry, wheezing kind of breath that makes you think of winter burials and pine boxes. Your spouse doesn't sleep either. You can tell from the way they shift their weight every few minutes. You can hear them whispering prayers into their coat sleeve, like maybe God only listens when you mumble. The candles burn low, the fire snaps and sinks. At some point, the wind knocks something off the roof, a shingle maybe, or the chimney cap. You freeze. Listen. Nothing breaks. Yet, you don't move. Not because you're calm, but because every muscle in your body is exhausted from clenching. You lie there for hours. The dark stretches on forever. The storm refuses to end. When morning comes, if you can even call it that, it's just a slightly lighter shade of gray. No sunrise, no birds. Just silence, as if the whole world is holding its breath. You open the cabin door a crack. Snow pours in, drifts waist high, ice clinging to the sill. One shutter torn loose, half the woodpile buried. You shut the door again and lean against it. And then you laugh. A short, humorless laugh that sounds more like a bark. Because what else is there to do? You're trapped, out of dry wood, out of medicine, out of ideas. You feed the fire what you have left, splits of green pine that smoke more than burn. The kids are awake, quiet, staring at you with that waiting expression. Not afraid, just watching. You stir what's left in the pot. Mostly water. You add a bit of salt pork rind, a sprig of dried something. You tell them it's stew. You serve it in chipped bowls and tell them to eat slowly. They do, because what else can they do? Afterward, you wrap the sick child tighter. Their skin is clammy now, eyes glassy, breathing shallow. Your spouse gives you a look. You don't say it. You just feel it. There's no plan for this. You sit beside them, hold their hand. It's so small in yours, barely warm. You whisper something, not even sure what. Maybe their name, maybe goodbye. You don't remember. You're too tired, too cold, too human. You don't know what time it is. There's no clock, no sun, just firelight and the color of the snow outside. The sick child finally stirs, just a little, a noise, a breath with weight behind it. You lean in. They open their eyes for half a second. It's something, not recovery, but not the end either. You feed them a spoonful of warm broth. It dribbles out the side of their mouth, but they swallow most of it. You wipe their chin with a corner of your sleeve. The clean part, if such a thing exists anymore. You allow yourself, just for a moment, to believe they might pull through. But then the wind picks up again. The cabin shudders, and you're reminded that nothing is promised. Not today. Not even the next hour. You take inventory. Food, 2 potatoes, a handful of dried beans, a sliver of pork fat, 1 jar of pickled beets that no one wants but you'll eat if you have to. Wood, 3 legs of a chair, 1 broken shelf, maybe the handle of a broom. Medicine, none. Strength, questionable. You stare at the wall and count the cracks between the logs. It keeps your mind from going places it shouldn't. You don't cry. There's no time for that. Crying wastes water and salt and energy. Instead, you mutter to yourself while stitching a hole in the only winter glove that hasn't completely disintegrated. You don't need both gloves, just one hand to hold the axe. The other can freeze. Dinner comes and goes. The children chew slowly. The sick one sleeps again. You patch another pair of socks. You think about spring, not with longing, just calculation. How much food will be left? How many animals will survive? Will the roof last through another storm? You don't ask these questions out loud. Not because they're scary, because you already know the answers. Still, you pull the blanket tighter around the child. Still, you light 1 more candle from the emergency stash. Still, you bank the fire for night like you always do. Because habits are the last thing winter hasn't taken. You lie down. The floor creaks beneath you. The fire hisses. The wind sighs against the walls like a living thing that's almost, but not quite, done with you. You close your eyes, just for a moment, just long enough to rest before the next round, before tomorrow arrives, before winter reminds you again that survival isn't a victory, it's just what comes next. You dream about bread. Not just any bread, real bread. The kind that's warm from the oven, with a crust that cracks when you pull it apart, and steam that smells like comfort. You dream of butter, too, and honey, and a table that doesn't wobble when you lean on it, and a window you don't have to stuff with rags every night. Then you wake up, to cold, to hunger, to the sound of your own joints cracking as you try to stand up from the straw mattress without disturbing the pile of children still tangled around you like living blankets. You put on your coat. Same coat as yesterday, same as last week. It smells like sweat and wood smoke, and something faintly unpleasant you've stopped trying to identify. You open the door. Outside, the storm has passed. What's left behind is silence and snow. So much snow. The outhouse is buried. The barn door is stuck shut under a snowdrift taller than your shoulder. The sky is bright but pale, cold light, no warmth. You start digging. With a shovel that's been cracked since October. You bend, scoop, toss, over and over. Your arms scream. Your back begs for mercy. But you keep going. Because there's no such thing as rest until the path is clear. You make it to the barn and push the door open just enough to slide inside. The animals are still there. The pigs are alive somehow. Covered in frost, grunting their disapproval like it's your fault. The chickens are silent. Frozen? Number. Just bitter. You give them feed from the barrel. It's almost empty. You look at the mule. The mule looks back like he's reconsidering his contract with you. You break the ice in the water trough with a hatchet. Your hands are already numb. You don't care anymore. Back inside, the cabin smells like smoke and cabbage and damp cloth. The stew from last night is congealed. You chip it loose and reheat it. It becomes soup again. Sort of. The children eat. Slowly. The sick one opens their eyes and speaks. Just one word. Cold. You cry a little. You pretend it's just the onions in the soup. You sit beside them for a long time, just breathing, just watching. The wind doesn't howl today. That's something. You wash your face with snow melted on the stove. It stings. You change your socks. You find one without holes and feel like royalty. You check the roof. You check the windows. You check the woodpile and the stew pot and the children's feet and your own sense of reality. Everything's still fragile, but not broken. Not today. You go outside. The air is sharp but still. The woods are quiet. You stand there, alone, just for a second, and you realize you made it through another night, another storm, another impossible evening of fear and fire and frost. And somehow, you're still here, still standing, still chopping wood and stirring soup and darning gloves and hoping this isn't the year that breaks you. You pick up the axe again. Because dinner won't cook itself. Because warmth doesn't come free. Because this is winter, and you wouldn't last a day, but here you are. Anyway. Later that day, you finally find the strength to do something that doesn't directly involve death prevention. You sweep the floor. It sounds small. It is small. But when you live in one room with 5 bodies, a dirt floor, and boots that drag in pine needles and animal hair and mystery crumbs from a food that no longer exists, you start to notice the little things. You sweep under the table, under the bed, under the stove. You find half a button, a dead beetle, and what might be part of a mouse tail. You sweep it all into the fire. That counts as cleaning. That counts as something. You rearrange the shelves just to make space for the things you don't have. The sugar that ran out last month. The jar of coffee you rationed down to the last bitter grounds. The flour that now lives only in memory. You move things around, dust things. Whisper to yourself like a person who maybe needs a nap, but knows better than to expect one. Then you do something even braver. You take off your boots. For just 5 minutes. Your feet are pale, red around the edges, and shaped like something that came out of the icebox. You wiggle your toes. 2 don't move. You rub them. You press them near the fire. You make a noise that isn't quite pain and not quite relief, but definitely something ancient and animal. 5 minutes pass. You put the boots back on. They're still wet. They're always wet. And stiff. And cold. But they're boots. And you need them. You eat lunch. Sort of. A piece of bread with a smear of lard. A sliver of old cheese that smells like it's considering mutiny. You chew slowly. You don't talk. No one does. The kids are quiet. The sick child is awake again, drinking water, nibbling dry bread, not coughing blood today. That's what passes for good news. The afternoon is silent. You try to write something in the Bible again. Nothing fancy. Just a list of things that haven't gone wrong yet. The roof, the stove, the well, your own ability to stand. It's a short list, but it's a list. And somehow, that's comforting. You patch a coat. You sharpen a knife. You carve a button out of a bit of bone just to feel like you've done one thing today that wasn't reacting to a disaster. The wind doesn't pick up. That feels like a blessing. The clouds hang low, but they don't scream. The snow doesn't fall. The silence isn't threatening. It's just there, like the trees, like the cold. You bank the fire again. You tuck the children in. You lay on the mattress with your eyes open, staring at the ceiling, counting the knots in the wood until your brain forgets how to count. And you sleep. Not peacefully, but not in fear, and that's enough. The next morning, the sky is clear. Not blue, just less gray than usual. It feels wrong, almost. Like nature forgot to punish you for one day. You open the door and let the cold in. Not because you want to, but because you have to. Because you need more snow to melt for water. Because you need to check the traps. Because you need to be reminded that yes, outside still exists. And yes, it's still trying to kill you. You wrap a scarf around your face. It smells like the stew from 3 nights ago. You step into the snow. It crunches loud and deep. You used to hate that sound. Now you love it, because it means the snow has hardened, which means it's not falling, which means maybe this morning won't kill you. You walk to the tree line again. The traps are farther this time. The snow slows you down. Every step is like lifting a bucket of wet sand with your knees. You get to the first snare. Empty. Second, nothing. Third, broken. Something got caught. Something got away. Fourth, rabbit. Small. Alive. You dispatch it quick. Quiet. Not because you like it, but because you need dinner. And because letting it suffer feels crueler than the knife. You carry it back, hidden in your coat. The sun is just barely trying to shine through the trees. It feels strange on your face, warm almost. You want to stand there and let it touch you, but the cold seeps in anyway. It always does. You get home, skin the rabbit, wash the meat, boil the bones. The stew will taste like something today. Slightly. The sick child is upright now, sitting, staring. Their eyes still look hollow, but they drink water without help. You let yourself exhale. Not a full breath, just a piece of one. You fix a hinge on the door with a nail you straightened yourself on a rock. You fix a stool leg with twine. You fix your soul with a sip of hot water. And a moment near the window, where the light doesn't feel like punishment. You laugh once, quiet, tired, but real. The kind of laugh you don't tell anyone about because they'll think you're losing it. Maybe you are. You sit down, wrap a blanket around your shoulders, rest your head against the log wall, and for the first time in a long time, you don't immediately make a list of everything that needs doing. You just sit and breathe, because that's what survival is out here. It's not winning. It's not triumph. It's not a reward for good behavior. It's waking up, making something out of nothing, and doing it again tomorrow, and again, and again, until spring, or until you can't. Whichever comes first. The stew that night tastes like meat, real meat. You can't believe it. The kids even say something. One of them licks the bowl. You don't stop them. You do it too when no one's looking. No one asks what part of the rabbit they're eating. No one cares. It's warm. It's salty. It fills the cracks inside your stomach that have been echoing for days. You let yourself feel a little proud. Not loud proud, just a quiet, tired kind. You fed them again. You kept the fire going again. You chopped more wood, mended 2 pairs of socks, got the shutter back up, and even swept the floor. Again. Nothing spectacular. Just the kind of ordinary miracle that keeps people alive out here. You take a second before bed to sit by the fire. Alone. The others are asleep. Or pretending to be. The room is full of snoring and twitching limbs and the smell of damp socks drying too close to the flames. You lean back against the hearth and stare into the coals. The orange glow lights up the lines in your hands. You think about the things you miss. Not just big things, like family back east, or warm baths, or bread that doesn't crumble when you bite into it, but the little ones. Doors that don't creak. Blankets that smell like soap instead of smoke. Going to sleep without wondering what part of the roof might cave in next. You glance upward. It's still holding. For now. You hear something outside. Not the wind. Something else. You hold your breath. It's probably just a tree groaning, or snow shifting off the roof. But you still check the latch. Still check the windows. Because there's no cavalry coming. No neighbors close enough to hear you scream. Just you. And these 4 walls. And this long, long winter. You curl up under the blankets. Not because you're warm, but because you're tired of fighting. You close your eyes, and you tell yourself, again, that spring will come. Eventually. Maybe. Probably. Until then, you keep going. One splintered boot step at a time. You wake up to the sound of dripping. Not rain, not melting snow. Something worse. The roof. The spot above the bed, the one you patched last October with tar and stubbornness, has finally given up. There's a slow, cold drip landing right in the center of the blanket. You poke at it. Yep, soaked through. You sigh in a way that only someone who's slept in wet wool can truly understand. You push the mattress away from the leak. Not that there's much space to move. You just scoot it 6 inches toward the stove and hope for the best. Then you stare up at the ceiling and trace the dark lines of moisture creeping down the inside of the log wall. You mutter something that's not a curse word, but it wants to be. Outside, the wind's taken the day off, which is somehow more ominous than the screaming kind. The silence feels like a setup, but you take it. You get dressed. Same clothes, different day. You sniff the shirt. Shrug. There are no clean options, only less bad ones. You put your boots back on. They're still wet. Again. Of course they are. You go outside, and it's cold, but not bone-shattering cold. Just face-hurting, teeth-numbing, painfully normal cold. You take a breath. It doesn't hurt. That feels suspicious. You check the traps again. It's routine now. A kind of ritual. This time, 1 rabbit, 1 squirrel, 1 trap sprung and empty. You take the wins. You bring them home. Clean them. Hang the meat to dry. Save the bones for broth. You don't waste anything. Not even the feet. You use them to scare the kids into doing chores. It works. You boil water for laundry. Again. because your socks have reached a new level of stiff that can only be described as weaponized. You beat them against a rock until they give up. You scrub shirts with a chunk of old soap that smells like tallow and sadness. You rinse your hands in snow. You hang the laundry from a rope across the center of the cabin, because outside is still murder, and inside is slightly less murder. The kids complain. You tell them to be grateful the shirts don't bite. You cook, again. You try something new, rabbit and beans with crushed juniper. It tastes like effort. You pretend it's gourmet. You chew every bite at least 6 times and swallow with a sip of boiled water flavored with pine needles and mild regret. The kids ask what's for dessert. You laugh so hard it echoes. Then you find a single dried apple slice in the bottom of a jar and cut it into 5 pieces. They each get 1. You tell them it's special. They believe you. You believe it too, because it is special. Everything's special when you only have one of it. Afternoon rolls in like it always does. Slow, gray, and barely noticeable. You sit by the fire to sew a new patch onto the elbow of your coat. It's made from an old flour sack. Still has the faded imprint of the mill on it. You think about how strange it is that a bag that once held grain is now the only thing between your skin and frostbite. You finish the stitch, hold the sleeve up. Good enough. That's the gold standard out here. Not perfect. Not done. Just good enough to survive another day. You warm your hands on a flat stone that's been sitting beside the fire. It's a trick your neighbor taught you before he moved west. Wrap a hot stone in cloth, hold it under your coat, and pretend you're not cold. It works. Sort of. The cabin is quiet. The kids are napping. The sick one, too. Less coughing today. Still pale, still weak, but not fading. You let yourself hope. Just for a second. Then you hear it. A thud. Outside, you freeze. Listen. Another thud. Closer. You reach for the axe. You always keep it nearby, not just for wood, but for moments like this, when something unknown moves through the trees and your gut tells you not to ask questions. You open the door just a crack, and there it is. A deer. Half buried in snow, struggling to walk, ribs showing through its winter coat. You stand very still. The deer sees you, then limps off into the woods. You close the door slowly, because you're not going after it. You're not tracking game today. Not alone. Not with one axe and a cabin full of sick kids. But it reminds you. Spring does come, eventually. Even when it limps in, half-starved and dying, it still comes. You sit back down, throw another broken chair leg into the fire, start darning a mitten. You can hear the wind again, not howling, just brushing the cabin with the edge of its hand. You let it. You've stood through worse. And you're still here. Not thriving, not winning, but here. And sometimes that's everything. The sun tries to set, but honestly, you wouldn't know if it succeeded. It just dims. The light fades from a weak silver to a dull gray. And you know the day's over, not because of shadows, but because your body says so. Because the fire starts to feel more important than whatever's outside the window. You stir the evening pot. It's mostly broth again, a few slivers of meat, a pinch of salt, a story you tell yourself about flavor that isn't really there. You serve the bowls. No one complains. The kids eat like they're memorizing the shape of food for later. Your spouse eats slowly, as if chewing with intention will make it last longer. You sip yours between thoughts. You don't know what those thoughts are. You just know you're having them. Maybe about home. Maybe about your old life. Maybe just about whether that odd lump in the floor is a knot in the wood or a mouse that froze mid-sprint. After dinner, you do the usual. Rinse the bowls, bank the fire, check the door, press your hand against the log walls to see which side of the house is losing the most heat today. It's always the north wall. The moss in the cracks keeps falling out. You keep stuffing it back in. Then you sit, not to rest, not to think, just to sit. Because sometimes that's all you can do. The kids are huddled under the thickest blanket, whispering stories about wolves and ghosts and the neighbor who once fell in the creek and had to chop his own boot off. You listen, not to correct them, just to feel their voices. Your spouse knits something with fingers so stiff they shake. They drop a stitch, mutter, pick it back up. You admire that, the refusal to stop even when nothing's easy, especially when nothing's easy. You glance over at the sick one. They're asleep, breathing steady. Their cheeks have color again. You're scared to say it out loud, but deep down, you start to believe they might really make it. You lean back, close your eyes. Let the fire warm one side of your face. Tomorrow, you'll need more wood. You'll need to check the traps again. You'll need to patch the roof. You'll need to do about 17 other things that sound impossible from where you're sitting now. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight you just listen to the wind and the breathing and your own quiet reminder that somehow, despite everything, this family, this roof, this stubborn, frozen miracle of a life is still here. Morning again. You open your eyes to the ceiling. Same knots in the same pattern. Same cold in your lungs. You don't remember your dream, only that you were warm in it. That was the giveaway. It had to be a dream. You sit up slow. The mattress has frozen a little around the edges again. You peel yourself off it like old bark from a tree. You check the fire. Dead, of course. You poke the ashes. There's a little life left, enough to coax a flame if you whisper to it like a friend you wronged. You build it back from almost nothing. Tinder, kindling, breath, prayer. And there it is. Heat. Not much, but enough to start the day. Your hands don't work at first. Too stiff. Too cold. You rub them together until the feeling comes back, then regret it instantly because the feeling includes pain. The water bucket's frozen. You expected this. You break the ice with the back of a spoon because the axe would be too dramatic. And frankly, you don't want to explain the splinters to yourself later. You fill a pot and start boiling snow again. It's become a rhythm, an art form almost. Scoop, melt, boil, drink, repeat. You go outside. The snow has crusted on top. It holds your weight for 2 whole steps before you sink to the knee. Classic. You dig out the wood pile again. The shovel cracks against ice with that sharp sound that makes you clench your jaw every time. You manage to pry loose 5 good logs. 1 falls and lands on your toe. You don't cry. You just stand there, one eye twitching, questioning every decision you've ever made. You carry the logs back. The cabin welcomes you with the scent of smoke, wet wool, and victory. The kids are waking up. The sick one's upright, eyes alert. They ask for food. You almost cry again, but hold it together just long enough to hand them the smallest bowl of hot water and mashed beans anyone's ever been excited about. It's a good day. Well, less bad, but in winter, that is good. You sit. You sip tea made from dried pine needles and hope. You look around your little box of survival, these people, these walls, this fire, and you realize something you don't say out loud. You've made it farther than you thought. You've outlived 3 storms, 3 near starvations, 1 fever, and the collapse of a ceiling beam. You've chopped furniture to keep warm. You've eaten parts of animals you didn't know had names. You've faced mornings that felt like the world was trying to erase you. And here you are, still here, still swinging, still you. And that's more than most. The day drags on, but not in a bad way. More like the kind of long stretch you get used to out here, where time stops being about clocks and starts being about chores, about how many things you can fix before sundown, how many meals you can stretch before the next rabbit trap pays off. You spend the afternoon fixing a window. Sort of. You shove more rags into the gaps, pack some mud around the frame, nail a scrap of canvas over the drafty spot. It flaps when the wind hits it, but less than before, so you call it progress. Then you work on the roof beam, the one that's been sagging since December. You brace it with a chair leg and a prayer. It creaks, but holds. You stare at it for a full minute after stepping back. Not because it's beautiful, it isn't, but because it didn't fall. Which frankly, feels like a miracle these days. Your spouse is boiling more snow. You nod at them. They nod back. That's a whole conversation now. The kids are playing a game involving a wooden spoon, a rag doll missing a face, and a piece of string you're pretty sure came off your boot. They're laughing, which is weird and wonderful and slightly suspicious. You decide not to ask. Instead, you go outside to breathe. The air bites your nose, but the sky's got color in it. Not just gray, actual color. A little gold near the edge. A little pink. You haven't seen that in weeks. You watch it for longer than you should. Then you bring in more firewood. Always more wood. Even when you think you're done, you're not. Because fire is the only reason anything in this house has a pulse, including you. Dinner is thin again, beans and broth, but you season it with a single flake of dried pepper. Just one. It lights up your tongue like you bit into the sun. The kids react like they've discovered flavor for the first time. One of them cries. From joy. You laugh so hard your stomach hurts. You go to bed that night, wrapped in 3 blankets and one warm thought. You made it through another day. Still cold. Still hungry. Still human. Still here. And sometimes that's enough. You wake up to silence, not the kind that says peace, the kind that says something's wrong. You sit up fast, faster than you've moved in days, and listen. No wind, no creaking, no coughing. Too quiet. You check the fire, still alive. You check the children, still breathing. You check the roof, still attached. You exhale, finally. A long, shaky kind of breath that fogs up the window when you lean close. You realize it snowed again. Not a storm, just a blanket. Clean, even, soft. which would be nice if it weren't also a reminder that your shovel's about to get real familiar with your spine again. You drink hot water. You pretend it's tea. You chew on a piece of hard biscuit. It tastes like memory foam and grief. You go outside, shovel in hand. The snow glows in the early morning light. It's too bright, too calm, like nature is trying to apologize, but not very convincingly. You clear a path to the outhouse first, because nothing ruins a morning like falling waist deep into snow while urgently trying to reach a hole in the ground. You come back in. The cabin smells like wool and wood smoke and effort. You hang your coat near the fire. The sick child sits up without help. You stare at them like they've just performed a miracle. They drink broth, say thank you, smile even. You don't say anything. You just put another log on the fire and turn away before they see your eyes go wet. You spend the afternoon boiling more bones, saving the fat, skimming the broth, crushing dried herbs that taste like almost nothing but remind you of better meals. You fix a boot with twine and a bit of canvas. It looks like art, ugly art, but functional. You wipe down the table, sharpen a knife, whittle a new spoon just because your hands need to do something that isn't survival. The kids make up a song about the stew. It's mostly just the word stew repeated in different tones. It shouldn't be funny, but it is. You laugh. Again. You're not sure how that keeps happening, but it does. And that, more than anything, tells you you're not broken yet. You still get up, still shovel, still cook, still mend, still hold the line against the kind of cold that erases lesser people. You sleep that night wrapped in your own exhaustion, not comfort, just the kind of tired that feels earned. And even with the wind pressing at the door again, you manage to let your eyes close. Because this is life now, and somehow you're still living it. You lose track of the days. There's no calendar, just wood stacks, soup levels, blankets aired out, and the number of times you've reworn the same pair of socks before admitting defeat. You mark the wall in pencil, not for accuracy, just for the comfort of watching something go forward. One more line scratched in a room full of delays. It snowed again overnight, just a dusting, but enough to freeze the latch on the barn door. Again. You go out to chip it open, cursing under your breath while your breath turns to fog in the air and freezes on your scarf. The mule greets you with the same attitude as always. Part disappointment, part pity. You give him hay, what's left of it. You pat his neck like you're both still in this together. Back inside, you decide it's bath day. Not because it's time, just because someone smells wrong and it might be you. You boil water, mix in snow, wait some more. The tub is a tin basin near the stove. You strip down to your regrets and lower yourself into water that's somehow both scalding and cold at the same time. You hiss, grit your teeth, scrub fast. The soap barely lathers, the towel isn't dry. But when it's over, you feel almost human. Almost. You pass the towel to your spouse. They blink at you like you've handed them a rose. You both know it won't stay dry long. You hang your shirt over a chair to steam near the fire. It droops like it's ashamed of itself. Dinner is stew again. Surprise. The last of the rabbit, a few beans, and a chunk of potato that was soft before winter even started. You add salt. A crime, but a necessary one. The children ask for stories tonight. You tell them about a world with carriages that don't need horses, houses with lamps you can light without fire, food that comes in cans. You're making most of it up. Or maybe you're remembering old tales your father once told. Either way, the kids listen and laugh and imagine a life that doesn't stink like wet wool and boiled roots. And you let them. You sit by the fire, let the room go quiet, let the dark settle in, and you think, maybe, just maybe, the hardest part is behind you. Not gone, not finished, but survived. Another day, another pot of snow melting into water that tastes like soot and dust and the memory of cleaner things. You've stopped checking the window for sun. You just listen for sounds. Wood creaking, wind moaning, the faint groan of a pine tree threatening to come down on the roof. That's your weather report now. You count your steps in the morning just to feel like you're moving toward something. 8 steps to the stove, 6 to the door, 3 to the corner where you store whatever's left of your pride. You try on your coat. It's stiff. Smells like everything else. Sweat, wood smoke, wet dog. You still wear it. Because even stink is a kind of insulation. You head out to check the traps again. They're empty. All 4. Even the bait is missing from 1. You stand in the snow, chewing on the inside of your cheek, wondering if a raccoon outsmarted you again. You don't have the energy to be mad. You just reset the traps and head back home. Inside, the cabin's quiet. One child's asleep near the hearth with a doll made of rags tucked under their chin. Another is brushing their hair with a comb that lost most of its teeth. Your spouse is mending a mitten using thread they pulled from an old curtain. You sit. You watch the fire. It burns low and steady. You add 1 log, just 1. You stare at it, willing it to last longer than it should. You remember the first time you chopped that wood. You curse the knot in it, the way it twisted and fought the axe. But now you're glad. Because stubborn wood burns slow. Dinner is porridge today. You add molasses. A luxury. Just a drop. It tastes like a memory of sweetness. The kids smile. You let yourself smile too, just a little. Just for the taste of it. Afterward, you tell them a story. One from your own childhood. A tale of a summer day so hot, you jumped in a creek still wearing your shoes. They laugh like it's a fairy tale. They can't imagine heat. You can't imagine taking off shoes just to play. You sit in the quiet after. The fire pops. The walls groan. The wind tries the door again like a persistent debt collector. But it doesn't come in. Not tonight. You pull your blanket higher. Close your eyes and rest. Because winter hasn't beaten you yet. You're dreaming again. In the dream, you're barefoot in a green field. There's sun on your shoulders, grass under your feet, and something in your hand that smells like fresh bread. You're smiling. Then you wake up to your toe cramping from the cold. Reality is the opposite of bread. You wiggle your foot. It resists. Eventually, it gives in with a painful twitch. You groan. Not loud. Just enough to feel real. You get up, put on the coat that never dried fully, and start the fire again. You've stopped thinking of it as a chore. It's more like lighting your own heartbeat every morning. Without it, the house dies. You stare at the kindling like it owes you something. Then you coax it into flame. The sick child is better now. Not dancing or singing, but eating, walking, speaking in full sentences, which, around here, counts as a resurrection. You feed them porridge and a hard crust of bread you soften in broth. They say thank you. You say nothing, because your voice might break if you do. Later, you open the storage box under the bed. There's less in it every time. 1 jar of pickled carrots, a pouch of salt, a small sack of flour with a hole you patched 3 times. You close it again like you didn't see any of it. You go outside. You chop wood with a fury you don't explain to anyone. Each swing is a thought you can't say. Each crack is a feeling you've buried under weeks of fine. The blade bites deep into frozen logs, and chips fly like small, jagged victories. You stack them by the cabin. Perfect little towers of not dying today. Inside, you boil water again. Always boiling something. Snow, bones, time. The kids make dolls out of straw. They name them things like Mrs. Hot Bread and Captain Blanket. You don't question it. They're coping the same way you are. One small, weird invention at a time. You carve a spoon. You mend a shirt. You fix a hinge. Nothing big. But enough. Enough to say the day wasn't wasted. Enough to keep the fear just a little farther away from your ribs. That night, you eat stew with nothing in it but broth and dreams. And somehow, it still tastes like hope. Night falls without asking. You're still sewing when it gets dark. The last glove is finally beyond saving, so you stitch new ones out of an old sack. The thread pulls unevenly. The seams look confused, but when you slip your hand inside, it feels, miraculously, warm. You smile. A small, crooked thing. Your spouse looks up from the floor where they're fixing a hole in the bottom of a boot with pine pitch and stubbornness. They hold it up like it's art. You nod. It is. The children are asleep, curled like kittens under the quilts. You're not sure when they drifted off. You just know it was after stories about summer thunderstorms and gardens full of beans. They've never seen that garden. It only exists in your memory. But now it lives in theirs too, which feels like something. You listen to the fire. It cracks and pops like it's telling you secrets. You stretch your legs. They ache, not from one task, but from all of them. From waking up before the cold kills, from walking to the well that froze shut, from chopping logs with a back that's too tired and arms that never really recovered from last week's fall. You sigh. The kind of long, shoulder-sagging sigh that comes from carrying survival like a pack you can't set down. And then you go to bed. You wrap yourself in layers of scratchy wool and wishful thinking. The blanket smells like smoke. Your pillow is a rolled-up coat. Your dreams arrive slowly, like they're not quite sure it's safe to enter. But eventually they do. This time you're somewhere warm, somewhere with clean socks, and bread. Always bread. And no one needs to ask whether the stew has meat in it. You don't know how long the dream lasts. Only that when you wake again, it's still winter, still cold, still here, but so are you, and that, somehow, still counts. The next day begins like most others, with frost on the inside of the window and a fire that barely remembers how to burn. You don't even shiver anymore. Your body's adjusted, or given up. Hard to tell which. You shuffle into your boots, still damp, and head out to check on the barn. You brace yourself. You don't know why. The mule is still alive. So are the chickens. Barely. One of them looks at you like it's considering a hunger strike in protest of the living conditions. You throw them some feed. What's left? The water's frozen solid again. You break it with a stick because the axe is buried somewhere under a snowdrift and you don't feel like playing. Find the hatchet this morning. Back inside, the stove's going stronger now. The kids are awake. The little one is sitting near the fire holding a spoon like it's a sacred relic. They're hoping it will summon breakfast. You boil what's left of the oats. You scrape the sides of the jar for flavor. You serve 4 bowls and don't take one for yourself. You lie and say you're not hungry. Everyone knows you are, but no one says it. Because hunger is so common now, it's impolite to mention. You sip boiled pine water instead. It smells like the floor of a forest and tastes like doing your best. Later, you patch the hole in the roof with another board from the woodpile. You tell yourself it'll hold, even though you know it won't. You check the traps again, still empty. You stare at one for a long time like you're willing it to work, like you think it'll feel guilty and catch something just to make it up to you. It doesn't. You come home. Your spouse is mending socks again. They're down to darning over old darns. You nod. They nod. That's the end of the conversation. You boil more snow. You pull out the Bible, not to read it, but to press it flat again. It warped from damp air. You use it to level the table leg. The irony is not lost on you. Dinner is root soup, just roots. Some sliced, some mashed. Some you're not entirely sure are food. No one complains. You eat it like it's steak. Because it's hot. Because it's something. Because even survival soup tastes better when everyone's breathing. After dinner, you sit by the fire and try to remember what day it is. You can't. You're not even sure what month it is. Somewhere between almost spring and please let this end. You reach for the sewing basket, find the last bit of good thread, and start reinforcing the knees on your pants again. You've patched them so many times the original fabric is a rumor. You hear a distant cracking outside. You freeze. The kids stop playing. Even the dog, if you still had one, would have stopped chewing its foot. You wait. Another crack. Then nothing. Probably a branch falling under the weight of snow. Probably. You stare at the door anyway, just in case. Because fear is a sixth sense out here, and yours has been twitching for days. But nothing comes. You get back to sewing. You hum a little. You don't even notice you're doing it until your spouse looks up and smiles. Tired, but real. You keep humming. Because it's better than silence. Because silence means counting the things you've lost. The warmth, the food, the time. The parts of yourself that used to want more than just to not freeze to death in the middle of nowhere. The snow starts falling again before bed. Light, dry, feathery. It looks beautiful. If you squint, you know it'll make shoveling hell tomorrow. But for now, it's just there. Just falling. Just snow. You lie down. Pull the blanket up to your chin. You can hear the roof creak like it's thinking about collapsing, but hasn't made a decision yet. You close your eyes, and you think, this is life now. The waiting, the patching, the scraping, the praying that nothing breaks overnight. You don't dream. Or maybe you do, and just don't remember. Either way, when morning comes, It's cold again. But so are you. And so, for now, you're still even. You wake up with your face pressed against a log. Not by choice. That's just where your pillow wandered off during the night. Your neck hurts. Your back hurts. Your fingers don't want to uncurl. You sit up slowly, like a thawing tree. You cough once, just to see if you still can. The fire's gone down again. You start it back up like you always do, tired, quiet, focused. You don't even think about it now. It's just part of your nervous system. Check coals, add kindling, whisper an apology to the gods of flame. Hope, success. The kids are still asleep, their breath puffing into the cold morning air like little ghosts. You don't wake them. They deserve 10 more minutes in their smoky cocoon of half-warmth. You boil water. You chew a corner of yesterday's biscuit. You break your tooth. Almost. It wiggles a little, and you press your tongue against it all morning, wondering if this is the beginning of something worse. You don't tell anyone. They don't need to know. You go outside and find the snow isn't falling for once. That feels suspicious. You check the traps. One has a squirrel. You thank it, out loud, because you've learned to say thank you to the forest, to the wind, to your axe, to the luck that still occasionally turns your way. You carry it home, skin it, clean it, save everything, the fur, the tail, the bones. You're a museum of nothing wasted. Inside, the children are awake now. They're arguing over who gets to stir the stew. This is a good sign. You let them both stir it. One clockwise, one not. You pretend it's a magic ritual. They laugh. So do you. Then dinner comes, and the stew tastes faintly of squirrel and burnt hope. But it fills your stomach. You sit back. You breathe. You let your hands rest on your knees and listen to the soft clatter of a spoon against a wooden bowl. This moment? This is wealth. Right here, right now. Food in the belly. A roof overhead. A fire that's still burning. You know it won't last forever. Nothing does. But tonight, you won. And that's enough. Later that night, you find yourself staring at the ceiling again. The same knots. The same cracks in the same places. You've named a few of them. That one above the stove is Agnes. The one by the corner that leaks when the wind blows north? You call him Fred. You're not going crazy. You're just deeply alone in a house full of people who are also quietly losing their minds in rotating shifts. Your spouse is already asleep. They made a new patch for the blanket today, using the sleeve of a shirt nobody could wear anymore. The blanket is now heavier, uglier, and warmer. You love it more than most people. The fire's still going, barely. You think about getting up to feed it. Then don't. Then do. Then regret doing it, because the log you grabbed has a knot in it that hisses like it's judging your whole life. You go back to bed. Your toe still hurts from the wood you dropped on it 4 days ago. You check it in the dark with your finger. Still there. Still mad at you. You fall asleep listening to the wind again. Except this time, it's soft. Not angry. Not loud. Just a brushing kind of sound. Like the world outside is sighing instead of screaming. You drift off slow. And this time, you dream something strange. You're in a cabin again, but there's light everywhere. The walls don't leak. The floor is warm. There's bread. Real bread, sliced even, and soap. The kind that smells like herbs and money. You wake up halfway through eating a dream apple, back in your log cabin life. The smell of smoke in your nose, the cold biting your fingertips. But the dream doesn't leave you. Not this time. It lingers, just a little, like the taste of something sweet you thought you forgot. You get up, check the fire, look at the children, breathe, stretch, and start again. The air feels different today. You notice it the second you open the door. It doesn't punch you in the face. It just taps your cheek gently, like it's thinking about warming up, but hasn't committed yet. You step outside and don't immediately hate everything. That's new. The snow has a crust on it. Solid, brittle, satisfying to walk on until it suddenly collapses and swallows your entire boot. You say a word the Bible probably wouldn't approve of and keep walking. Your shoulders ache. Your legs feel like oak logs wrapped in old rope. But you move anyway. You check the traps. One has a bird. A small one. Barely meat. But meat. You thank it. You don't even skin it all the way. You pluck the feathers and drop them into a jar for later. Maybe stuffing. Maybe trade. Maybe nothing. But nothing still has value out here. You walk back home, holding the bird like it's gold. Inside, the cabin smells like something close to warmth. The stove's been fed. The quilts are drying. Someone started boiling snow without being asked. You pause. That's a small miracle. The children are sitting in a circle, making something from twigs and thread. It might be a toy. It might be a trap. You don't ask. You're just glad they're not crying or sleeping or coughing. You plop the bird onto the table. The kids cheer. You look at your spouse. They look at you. Neither of you says anything. You don't have to. You prepare the stew. You stretch it with potatoes that are half eyes, half starch. You season it with that one pinch of crushed something you found behind a jar last week and decided to save for a special occasion. This is that occasion. It tastes like effort. Everyone eats in silence, which isn't sad. It's reverent. This is what a feast looks like now. One small bird, one full belly, and 5 minutes where no one asks how much is left. After dinner, you sweep the floor. You fix a crack in the wall with a rag and a nail, and more sarcasm than structural integrity. Then you sit and listen to the fire, to the wind, to your own heart beating slow and quiet in your chest, and you realize you're not waiting for spring anymore. You're dragging yourself toward it, one bowl of stew at a time. You sleep light that night, not because of danger, just because sleep itself has started coming in smaller portions, like food, like warmth, like everything. You wake to the sound of a branch snapping somewhere in the woods. Nothing follows it. No wolves, no footsteps. Just the sound of winter continuing its slow, deliberate war with everything that breathes. You get up. Same routine. Same steps. Same fire that needs convincing. This morning, your hands barely work. The colds made the joints feel like rusted hinges. You stare at your fingers and whisper, "Come on." They listen. Eventually, you brew hot water. You call it tea. You pretend it helps. You chew on a piece of hard biscuit. This time you don't break a tooth. Progress. Your spouse stirs from under the blankets. They ask, How cold? You say, bad. They grunt. That's the entire conversation. Outside, the snow's starting to recede, just a little. You can see where the earth wants to be, where it's thinking about coming back. You shovel a path with numb feet and a back that's tired of asking for breaks. Halfway through, you stop and lean on the handle. You look up. The sun? Not much, just a sliver. But it's there. You stare at it like it's a visitor you forgot existed. Inside, the stew is heating again. Same pot, different day. You smell the meat from yesterday's bird, still clinging to the edges of the broth like a story everyone remembers, but no one tells right. You eat slow, not because it's hot, but because it's worth stretching. Every bite feels like a step toward something. You sit by the fire. You watch the children play a game with pebbles and a piece of string. You watch your spouse fix the lining of a coat that's more patch than original cloth now. You feel the floor beneath you, the uneven, cold, creaky wood, and you realize something strange. You're used to this, not in a tragic way, just used to it, like breathing thin air, like walking uphill, like waking up and surviving again. Later, while the children nap, you sit outside with your back against the wall of the cabin. Not because it's warm, it's not, but because it's different. And out here, different is a kind of luxury. You listen to the trees groaning under their snow load. You watch the wind chase powder across the clearing like it's rehearsing for a ballet no one asked to attend. You run your thumb along the callus on your palm. It's thick now, rough, permanent. You think about how soft your hands used to be. You can't remember when. Inside, your spouse is humming again. The same tune they always hum when mending or cooking or just trying not to fall apart. You don't know the name of the song. Maybe it doesn't have one. Maybe it's just called Holding On. You get up, shake off the snow, go back inside. You catch a warm pocket of air near the stove and just stand there for a minute, like you're visiting something sacred. You stir the pot. You wipe the table. You clean the soot from the kettle with a rag that's already too black to judge. Dinner is thinner than usual, but you have enough for everyone. And somehow, it feels like a feast anyway. You eat it with the quiet reverence of people who know what it's like to not have enough. Afterward, you lie on the floor with one of the children curled up beside you. They ask if spring is real. You think for a long time before answering. Then you say, yes, but it's shy. They nod like that makes sense, because it does. You stay like that for a while, your back against rough boards, their head on your arm, the fire casting shadows across the log walls. The storm might come back tomorrow. The traps might stay empty. The roof might leak again. But for now, the room is warm. The air is still. The silence is kind. And that, for tonight, is enough. You wake up with sunlight in your eyes. Not just light. Sunlight. Warm, golden, ridiculous. You blink like it's a trick, like someone snuck a lantern into the sky while you weren't looking. You sit up, rub your face, stumble to the window and squint through the grime. It's real. The snow is melting at the edges of the trees. The air has color in it. You see birds, actual birds, moving, living, chirping like they own the place. You laugh, then cough, then laugh again. You throw open the door without putting on your coat, then regret that immediately and slam it shut while cursing. Still cold, but less so. You light the stove with half a smile. You don't even know why. It just happens. The kids wake up cranky, but less tired, less sunken around the eyes. They argue over who gets the last strip of bark to chew on, which you've been calling candy for at least 2 weeks. Your spouse stretches their arms and doesn't immediately sigh. That's how you know things are turning. You eat breakfast slowly. There's a squirrel bone in the broth, and it makes the whole room smell like meat, even if it doesn't taste like much. You wash the bowls with melted snow and optimism. Outside, the roof is dripping, one slow drop at a time. It sounds like a clock, a spring clock. You go check the woodpile and find, to your horror, you still have some left. Enough for a few more nights at least. You chop a fresh log anyway, because it feels like victory now. The axe sinks deep. You grin at the sound, the thud of it, the control, the clean split. You stack the wood and stretch your arms and feel something you haven't in a while. Strong, not just surviving, not just dragging your body through the hours. Strong. You sit on the step, boots off, soaking in sun through a hole in the clouds. The wind is still cold, but there's warmth somewhere underneath it now. And for the first time in weeks, you believe it might actually come back for good. By the next morning, the icicles are weeping. They drip in rhythm, one beat every few seconds. You stand under the eaves with your mouth open, catching one drop just to prove to yourself that it's real. It tastes like dust and soot and roof tar. Still better than half the things you've eaten lately. Inside, the air smells different. Not good. Just different. Less like wet wool. More like slightly drier wool. You peel off one layer of clothing before breakfast, and no one gasps in horror. That's progress. You boil water for oatmeal. You find a tiny chunk of dried apple in the jar and cut it into 5 pieces so everyone gets some. It tastes like memory. One of the kids asks if they can go outside without their mittens. You say no, because you're not insane. But the fact they even asked tells you something. The cabin is no longer prison. It's just home again. You sweep the floor. Real dirt under the soot now. You see the wood grain. You run your fingers along it and feel a knot that used to snag every rag you dragged across it. You remember when that annoyed you. You kind of miss it. Your spouse patches a hole in the roof with the last dry board. They don't swear once while doing it, which is either maturity or exhaustion. Either way, you're impressed. Later, the sun comes out long enough for you to open a window. You don't need to, but you do it anyway. Just to let some light in. Just to hear the wind without tasting it. The kids run outside, screaming like someone handed them summer in a jar. You watch them sink to their ankles in slush and laugh. Because now you can. You know there's still more winter ahead. Another cold snap. Maybe 2. But now, you can see the end. Not just hope. Evidence. The creek is moving again under the ice. The birds are louder. The sky's not just gray, it's blue. You sit by the fire, warm on just one log, and close your eyes. And this time, when you fall asleep, you dream of planting things. The thaw begins in strange ways. Your boots don't freeze overnight anymore. The butter is soft by morning, even if it still tastes like regret. Your fingers work better. They don't feel like splintered bone every time you try to grip a spoon. You still wake up cold, but not scared cold. There's a difference. Outside, the snow is pulling back from the trees like it's ashamed of overstaying its welcome. You see patches of brown earth, muddy, cracked, littered with twigs, but you stare at them like they're paintings. You can smell things again. Wet bark, old pine, the rot of leaves that didn't make it. It's not pleasant, but it's real, and real beats beautiful. Inside, you let the fire go low on purpose for the first time. You sit with a cup of broth and don't even hold it like it's your last lifeline. You just sip it, casual, like a person with options. You check the food stores and realize you actually have some left. Not much, but some. A jar of pickled beans, a handful of flour, a bit of salt, enough for a meal that doesn't involve pretending twigs are seasoning. You celebrate by baking a flatbread that sticks to the pan and burns on one edge. It smells incredible. The kids eat in silence, eyes wide, crumbs on their faces like proof that miracles exist. You don't say anything. You just tear off a piece, chew slow, and taste more than flour. You taste relief. Later, you all sit on the floor. Just because the chairs are tired. You play a game with rocks. You don't know the rules. You're pretty sure the kids are making them up as they go. You let them win. You pretend you don't see your spouse watching from the corner, eyes shiny. You all need this strange, warm, ordinary moment where nobody is freezing, nobody is crying, and nobody is thinking about the shovel. You sleep better that night. The fire fades early, and you let it. You wrap yourself in a blanket that doesn't itch anymore and listen to the sound of dripping snow. And for the first time in a long while, you believe in tomorrow. You start waking up before the cold does. There's a stillness in the morning now that doesn't feel like threat. Just quiet. No more checking your breath in the air to see if you're in danger. No more ice on the inside of the windows. Just a soft chill, one you can handle. The water bucket doesn't freeze overnight anymore. You still check it out of habit, but it greets you now like an old friend, not an enemy. You build the fire anyway, because you're not foolish. But you don't hover over it the way you used to. You give it space. Let it burn without begging it to stay. Breakfast is simple, oats again. But you've stopped caring. It's warm, it goes down easy. The kids don't argue over spoons today. Your spouse hums while mending a torn sleeve. They're using real thread this time. Not twine, not bark fiber, not desperation, just thread. You step outside, and your boots sink into the soft slush of a yard, trying to remember it used to be dirt. There's a smell in the air. It's not fire or sweat or mold. It's fresh. Wet, yes. Muddy, yes. But new. You don't trust it yet. But you're willing to believe. The animals are louder now. You hear birds like they're performing just for you. The mule snorts like he's coming out of retirement. You even see a rabbit. You don't chase it. You just watch. You chop wood with sleeves rolled up. You don't sweat, but you don't freeze either. Your muscles remember what they're for, and for the first time in weeks, the ache feels earned instead of endless. You stack the wood in a lopsided pyramid. It leans. You don't fix it. You go back inside. The cabin smells like sun-warmed pine and old stew. You sit by the fire. You don't say much. No one does. But the silence is softer now. Less like holding your breath. More like breathing without fear. You eat together. You clean up together. You listen to the snow dripping off the roof like it's playing a song. And for once, you don't think about what could go wrong next. You just sit there, warm, full, and still alive. You try something bold today. You open the front door, and you leave it open. Just a crack, just for a few minutes. You want to hear the wind move through the trees without it sounding like a warning. It feels like cheating, but it feels good. The kids pile out after you like a pack of overexcited puppies. They kick at the leftover snow like they're fighting a monster that finally lost. One of them falls in a mud puddle. They don't cry. They laugh. You do too. Even your spouse laughs, holding up a threadbare shirt to catch the worst of it. You all look ridiculous, like survivors in a world that forgot to kill you. You wash clothes today, not just out of desperation, but because it might actually dry. You string a line between two trees and hang each piece with shaking fingers. Not from cold, just disbelief. The sun hits your skin in patches. Not warmth, exactly, but the idea of warmth. That's enough. You go back inside and air out the bedding. You open the windows. For real this time. The air that comes in smells like wet bark and thawed soil and the possibility of growing things. You want to bottle it. You try a new stew recipe, meaning you throw in a handful of crushed leaves someone swore were edible last fall. It tastes like furniture, but nobody complains. Because it's not about flavor anymore. It's about variety, about memory. About the tiny reminder that there's more to life than just getting through it. After dinner, your spouse reads from the Bible. You're not particularly religious anymore, but their voice is calm, measured, warm, and that's sacred enough. You sit there, hands wrapped around an empty mug, and you feel something strange. You're not just surviving now. You're beginning to remember what living feels like. You close your eyes, not because you're tired, but because, for once, you can. Spring doesn't arrive like a parade. It sneaks in like a rumor, one melted path at a time. The snow disappears from the cabin's shadow first, then from the clearing, then from the woods, reluctantly, like it's being evicted by the sun. You don't trust it. Not yet. But you stop wearing 3 shirts to bed. That's something. The axe finally splits wood without bouncing off the frozen knots. The pile by the door grows, and for the first time in months, you're stacking it because you want to, not because you're terrified of running out. The kids start asking about fishing. You tell them it's too early, but you let them dig out the rods anyway, because it's nice to see them hopeful again. You find seeds, carefully wrapped in oiled paper at the back of the cupboard. They look like dust. You treat them like gold. You sit at the table, counting them out with your spouse, whispering names, beans, squash, corn, like you're telling stories to ghosts. You clear the patch of soil behind the cabin. It's too wet, too soft, too cold, but you rake it anyway. You plant one thing, just one, not for food, for faith. Inside, you sweep out the cabin. Properly this time. Not just pushing around soot and crumbs, but actually cleaning. You find a lost button under the bed. You find a spoon that rolled behind the stove. You find yourself tired, weathered, maybe even older, but still you. The stew tastes better now, not because the ingredients changed, but because you did. You add green shoots to it, wild onion, early herbs. They taste sharp and alive. The children laugh when they bite into one. They say it tastes like a secret. That night, you sit by the open window, listening to frogs. Real frogs. Not a memory or a dream or a sound your mind made up to fill the silence. You sip hot water with mint you dried last fall. It tastes like resilience. You lie down. The blanket is lighter now. Your breath doesn't fog the air. And for the first time in a long, long while, you sleep all the way through the night. Morning comes with birdsong. Real birds, loud ones, arrogant little things chirping like they invented sound. You want to yell at them to shut up. Instead, you smile. Then you stretch, and every bone in your back reminds you that smiling still costs something. The stove still gets lit, but you don't huddle around it like a beggar anymore. You just tend it, like a friend you don't need, but still love. Breakfast is not bad. You've stopped calling it gruel and started calling it porridge again. That feels fancy. The kids eat with both hands. Your spouse hums. The walls don't creak from cold anymore, just age. You step outside with bare hands and don't lose a finger. You wipe mud off your boots instead of chipping off ice. You feel sweat under your shirt and don't panic. You start repairs, real ones. Not survival patches, not just hold until April fixes. Boards come off, nails go in, hinges get replaced. You use a whole extra nail just because you can. You make a new fishing net with the kids. They tangle the twine on purpose and then laugh so hard they fall over. You don't scold them, you laugh too, then untangle it. Then show them how to tie it again. The soil is still soggy, but you dig anyway. You plant beans. You plant corn. You mark the rows with little sticks, like a promise to the future. Evening comes warm. Not hot, but kind. You sit on the step with your spouse and say nothing. Not because there's nothing to say, but because this silence is full. You watch the last light hit the trees and listen to the drip, drip, drip of water from the roof. And it doesn't sound like grief anymore. It sounds like rhythm. It sounds like time. You close your eyes. You breathe. You hold your hands over the soft, ash-warmed firewood, and you think, you made it. You actually made it. Not because you had enough, not because it wasn't hard, but because you were harder, and spring didn't save you. You dragged yourself to it, one frozen breath at a time. Now it's mud season. No one warns you about this part. No one tells you that after months of ice and starvation and praying your roof won't cave in, you'll spend the next several weeks slipping in wet earth and pulling your boots out of puddles that try to eat them. You fought snow and wolves and frostbite. Now you fight soggy dirt. And somehow it's just as personal. Your kids come in soaked to the knees, covered in mud, holding a worm like it's treasure. You tell them not to bring it inside. They bring it inside anyway. You put it in a jar. You name it lunch insurance. Outside, The trees are finally remembering how to be green. You stare at the buds forming on the bare branches and think they look absurd. Tiny, delicate, clueless, like they've never seen a blizzard in their lives. You envy them. Then you go dig the latrine trench again because the old one flooded. You splash mud in your eye. You curse out loud. The mule hears you and doesn't judge, which is nice. Back in the cabin, you hang laundry that smells like smoke, pine, and rain. The shirt's actually dry now. Not fully, but dry enough. Your spouse bakes something. It has flour in it, and actual fat, and a pinch of sugar you've been hoarding since last September like it was national treasure. It tastes like joy. The kids cry. You cry. No one mentions it. That night, you light a candle not because you need to, but because you want to. You sit at the table and run your fingers over the wood grain that you haven't seen in months. The surface is rough, uneven, worn, but it's still here. So are you. You say a prayer, not out loud, just in your head. It's not for miracles. It's not for wealth. It's just, let next winter be less cruel, and maybe, somehow, it will be. You don't realize how much tension you've been carrying until it's gone, until you step outside one morning and notice you're not bracing for cold. Your shoulders are relaxed. Your jaw isn't clenched. You're not scanning the horizon for trouble. You're just standing, breathing, alive. The creek behind the cabin flows again. You go down to it with a bucket and watch the water run like it never stopped. Like it wasn't frozen solid just weeks ago. Like it didn't leave you rationing snow and hoping it wasn't yellow. You fill the bucket and splash some on your face. It's shockingly cold. You don't care. You laugh. You start planting the garden in earnest. Row after row, squash, beans, a few herbs. You pull weeds like they personally insulted you. You dig with a vengeance. Like every root you yank out is winter itself being exorcised from your soil. The cabin door stays open most days now. Flies wander in. So do bees. You swat them away half-heartedly. You're too tired to be angry at insects. You just tell them to behave and move along. The stew pot gets a break. You cook eggs on a skillet like it's a holiday. You make biscuits with flour you found in a barrel you forgot about. They come out flat and sad, but edible. The kids dunk them in broth and pretend they're in a tavern. You let them. They've earned it. Your spouse takes a walk into the woods and comes back with berries. Just a few. Just enough to stain everyone's fingers and give the pot of porridge a little color. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever eaten. You hang the blankets on the line. They smell like wind. You sit with a cup of pine tea and watch your breath not fog the air. The mule brays lazily. The fire goes out and no one rushes to relight it. And you, tired, dirty, scraped up by months of fighting cold with nothing but grit, finally sit still and feel warm from the inside. You find yourself smiling more now, not wide, not loud, just those quiet, accidental smiles that slip out when the sun hits your hands and there's nothing sharp in your boots. You hear frogs at night. Not just one, a whole choir of them. They chirp and croak and carry on like the world never froze. Like it never trapped you in a cabin for months with nothing but wood smoke, sour bread, and the same 3 stories told by firelight. You lie in bed and listen. And instead of wondering if you'll survive the night, you wonder if you should plant tomatoes. You haven't eaten one in almost a year. But you remember the way they taste, juicy, sharp, alive. You can almost feel it. Your body is still recovering. The skin on your knuckles is raw from months of chopping, scraping, patching. Your shoulders ache. Your toes still don't bend all the way, but you don't limp anymore. You just walk funny. You think about cutting your hair. It's full of knots and ash. You don't. Not yet. You've come to respect the mess. You spend more time outdoors now. You repair the shed roof. You check on the beehive that miraculously survived. You find a single chicken egg in the coop. You hold it like it's made of crystal. You bring it inside and crack it into the skillet like a celebration. The yolk is gold. You cry a little. No one says anything, but they all notice. The next day, your spouse finds another egg. You eat it together, splitting it 4 ways. You don't care. You joke about making a pie out of bark and moss. The kids laugh. You laugh. And it doesn't sound forced anymore. It sounds like something real, something returning, something that winter didn't manage to kill.